26, 2017. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. Keller?
Here.
Mr. Browning?
Here.
Mr. Rohr?
Here.
Mr. Hellinger?
Here.
Vice Mayor Schaefer? Mayor Riggle?
Here. Is there a motion to excuse Mr. Schaefer?
So moved. Second.
The motion by Mr. Jones, a second by, which one do you guys say? Mr. Rohr. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Item 2 on the agenda is the invocation, and tonight we are blessed to have Gunnar Serta here, and he's with the Ohio Health. You're doubling up on us. So if you'll all please stand for prayer, and it'll be followed by the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us be in a spirit and attitude of prayer. Holy One, who we know by many names, that you have called us to be yours and that you have called us into community, and that the work of community is on all of our parts. We ask that you would be with us and among us in this space and bless us in our deliberations with your wisdom, with your courage, and your empowerment. We also ask that you would bless those who serve our city in the many capacities in which they do, and that you would bless those who serve our country, both here and abroad. We ask this all as we gather this evening in your holy and gracious name. Amen.
Pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 4 is the approval of the motion summary of the regular meeting of council held June 12th, 2017, as recorded and transcribed. What is the wish of council?
Motion to approve. Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Hellinger, second by Mr. Rohr. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 5 is the consent agenda. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Item A, acceptance of the motion summary for the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board meeting held April 18, 2017. Item B, resolution number 17-36, a resolution appointing council members to various committees, commissions, and/or boards. Item C, resolution number 17-37, a resolution appointing members to various boards, commissions, and/or committees and specifying the term of the appointment. Item D, resolution number 17-38, a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a cooperative agreement with the Ohio Department of Transportation to install rectangular rapid flashing beacons on Troy Road at Barrett Street and on Pennsylvania Avenue at Heritage Boulevard. Item E, resolution number 17-39, a resolution canceling the first regular meeting of City Council July 10, 2017.
Thank you. What is the wish of council on the consent agenda?
Motion to approve the consent agenda as presented. Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Hellinger, a second by Mr. Rohr. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Item 6 is time set aside for letters, petitions, or public comments for anything that is not on tonight's agenda. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to come forward? If you'll come forward to the microphone. And for the record, we're going to need your name and your address. You can pull that microphone back down so we might hear you.
Okay. My name is Deborah Giebert. My address is 265 West Fountain, Delaware, Ohio. And I am, yes, Mayor Riggle, members of the Delaware City Council. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. And I hope I have something worthwhile to say. Now, I realize that you have scheduled an open public comment period. So there will be another opportunity later. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Are you speaking about the item number?
For the door, yes, about the DORA, yes. So that, thank you all for all that you do for the city. we appreciate your work on that. And there are occasions, however, when perhaps there are differences of opinion on what is the most healthy way to approach. And having read what is proposed for Dora to have this open air, basically using the city as a sort of open bar, even though not necessarily for a permanent situation, I feel that that would not be something that is going to promote positive neighborhood, positive interactions, a positive sort of area. Now, I understand that you had Todd, the owner of Fresh Start Bakery, here last week or last meeting, and he also made the comment that this would change the atmosphere of the downtown area, and I would very much agree with that. But I would say I think it will do more than just change the atmosphere. I think it will actually change the character. I think it will have a deeper effect on that. If we look at the cold statistics of the matter, in Ohio, the statistics say that 20%, or 1 out of every 5 people, suffer from alcohol abuse. Now, for women, it's lower than that. For men, it's higher. 20% is the average. For men, it's 1 out of 4. It's a pretty startling statistic. So that means that if you have 100 men down here participating in some event, 25 out of those 100 men will be people who struggle with some alcohol abuse issue. Now, we also see, aside from the statistics, we see that in our local area, we have several AA groups in churches just down the road in the neighborhood. So there is a demand for that already locally. The police blotter in the Delaware Gazette very frequently lists issues to do with alcohol that they've had to deal with. And we also have the testimony of people who live in some of the housing that either on Sandusky or just around the corner there close to the university, Spring Street. I know of 2 people who have families who live in those areas and have told me that they suffer from various issues to do with abuse of alcohol. So it seems to me that the main reason to consider opening it up to further use in terms of alcohol is simply the profit motive, and the merchants are hoping that they will make more money. But that apparently is also questionable, but I won't go into that detail right now because I know this is not the main period for it. So I just want to close by saying, I think we as a community have always tried to be charitable towards people. We have tried to help people who are in need, and I think we're quite well known for having free meals a couple times a month in various churches, and for collecting toys for children at Christmas, or collecting coats for people that may not have them, or school supplies and so on. And those kind of things, a deeper concern for our neighbor includes not just trying to see that their physical needs are met in certain ways, but also trying to construct our public policy in ways that will nudge them towards positive behavior rather than negative behavior, and a public policy that is realistic about the dark side of human nature. So I would just like to, put that forward for your consideration as you continue on this discussion.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Joel Schaefer. I live at 242 West Lincoln Avenue, Delaware. And this, from the last one, it seems like we're into the sin issues here in Delaware. Mine has to do with the article that's in the flyer on May 28th. Legalization means local leaders must make a choice about medical marijuana. I was particularly interested with Ms. Keller's comment that she didn't think that the city of Delaware is in a position to turn away any industry. I don't agree with that. To me, the marijuana issue, when it was voted here in the state of Ohio, it failed 77%. However, our legislators, in this case, Chris Jordan and Mr. Brenner, decided not to listen to the voters, but they decided to legalize it. I don't see where allowing the growth in the business of medical marijuana in Delaware is really a positive thing for Delaware. Mr. Holman made the statement that the city of Powell refused to allow it to happen. I look at Delaware and think, would I rather be a Powell, or do I want to be a Marion, Ohio, which is what, our worst city for heroin? I'm sure they're going to fully embrace growing all the marijuana they can get, but I don't see why we should lower our standards and allow medical marijuana growth or businesses in the city of Delaware. I hope you would consider this, but I look for something a little better for Delaware than medical marijuana. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Is there anyone else that would like to speak tonight? Seeing none, we'll close the public comments and we'll move on to the committee reports. Mr. Jones?
I have nothing tonight, Mayor.
Mrs. Keller?
I have none.
Mr. Browning?
Nothing to report.
Mr. Rohr?
No, thank you.
Mr. Hellinger?
Nothing to report.
All right. Move on to item 8, which is consideration of a new liquor permit. This isn't going well tonight, guys. Want to read number 8 for me, Elaine?
Item A, Olivina Tap Room LLC, doing business as Olivina Tap Room at 44 South Sandusky Street, Delaware, Ohio, 43015. Permit classes C2 and D6.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening. The item before you is a new liquor permit, and as you can see, it's an existing business at 44 South Sandusky Street. It's the Olivina Tap Room. Business specializes in high-end olive oils that are for sale, and under this permit request, it appears that they would also like to offer wines that complement their olive oils in sealed containers that would be sold from the premises, which would be the C2 section of the license. And then under the D2 section of the license, they would also sell sealed containers but could offer in the store. We have conducted background investigation on the standard criteria that we typically do, and we have not found that there's a legislative basis for requesting a hearing to object to the issuance of this liquor permit.
For the record, is it a D2 or a D6?
It's C2 and D2.
Our agenda says D6.
I think that's,
Okay. Just make sure that.
yeah, that may be an error on our
Okay.
permit report.
I'll
It
make
does
sure we're
say D6 on the actual Division of Liquor Control.
I'll make sure we're all on the same page.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any questions? Pleasure of the will of the council.
I move for approval.
Second.
I have a motion by Mrs. Keller, a second by Mr. Jones. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Item 9 is presentation. Bill, if you want to come forward. This is a presentation or the Point Improvement Project update.
Thank you, Mayor Riggle, members of council. City manager asked me to put together a fairly quick presentation just to let you know where we are with the project. You are aware we've had a number of funding applications, successful applications. Thank you, David. Front page just shows you our partners to date with the project. Obviously, city, state of Ohio, federal transportation, and MORPC right now are our funding partners in it, and we'll continue to seek additional partners as this project moves on. Dave, you go to the next slide. And I think you have this information in your packet too. This just really shows the funding breakdown where we are right now. The green box on the left side shows what is equivalent to about 19.5 million already in this project. And let me say this, regarding these large federal projects, typically projects are funded through preliminary design or through final design or through right-of-way. We've got funding that'll take us deep into construction. We are ahead of the curve, so to speak, on this type of project. So we should be very glad about that and be willing to move forward fairly expeditiously. But you can see the funding sources. The 13.279 is the 2022 equivalent of our award through our Regional Planning Commission. Safety funds for $3 million is from the state and $1.5 million from the Transportation Review Advisory Council. Those funds together will get us far past the design phase and right-of-way acquisition phase in this and really prepare us to be in a position to go to construction. The JED numbers are Mr. Stelzer's estimate of revenues that would be available for this project at the point construction could come around again in 2022. So a total of about $19.5 million. Our projected costs are shown in the blue box on the right, and we do total $25.15 million is our projected project cost. So if you look at your pie chart on the bottom, you can see that the medium blue color is still a $6.1 million funding gap in the project in the project at this early stage. Again, you can see that's 24%, so we're 76% funded already in this project based on our estimates, which is a very good position to be in for this type of project. If you go to the next slide, David, and I provided you with kind of an outline of where we see the project will move forward. The solid red vertical line is just the point we're at right now, and the little red flags are just important decision points that we're at. I think the decision point we're really at tonight is the decision to move forward expeditiously without any delay. We are at the point right now where we have interviewed our consultants and are ready to make a recommendation to select a consultant to go into contract negotiations with this project. We hope to actually contact that consultant this week and let them know that they're our preferred consultant. ODOT and Delaware County helped us with that process, and we're ready to move forward, and that's a decision point we're at right now. The other red flags you see in the middle of 2017 is a partnering agreement, which is a standard agreement with MORPC, which says we are acknowledging the fact that they're dedicating over $13 million of fund for this project, and we will use it and keep the project on the time frame that was included in our application. Then later this year, we'll have legislation with ODOT to keep us, the actual legislation that says these are our responsibilities and these are ODOT's responsibilities throughout this project process. Then as you go down the line, the rest of the items there are all the items involved in this project process as we project out all the way to 2022. We hope to be in a position for construction. Really of note, you'll see that about 2/3 of the way down, right below where it says NEPA approval, prepare additional funding applications. That's the point where we'll have all of the preliminary design and final design done and the environmental clearance that we can go ahead and say we've got a cleared feasible project that's been approved through the environmental process, and there's nothing standing in the way of us in construction but for the funding gap. So between now and that point, city manager and I will be working at closing that funding gap with the partners. At that point also, we'll be in a position to make additional applications to the state saying this is our funding gap, our known funding gap at this point. We have an approvable project that's got environmental clearance and we are requesting additional funds. It's in a much stronger position to be able to go in and say you have environmental clearance on a project like this, as opposed to trying to go and ask for additional funds now. We haven't gotten that far. So our target time is somewhere in 2019 to be able to go and make an additional large application to fill the gap, assuming that there's still a gap left to be filled, but we haven't found other sources of funding for that. So that's the process that we're going through. I know there's a lot of steps here. Just want to make a couple of points. This is a federally funded project, so we adhere to the development plan process through the state. It's very rigid on when we can and can't have certain meetings, and when we can and can't talk to certain folks about whether it's property acquisition or impacts and utilities. That all will follow the process. Project delay is very important. We are signing an agreement with MORPC and with ODOT saying we will stay on track. There'll be a couple dozen or so major points during this project. They'll ask us to say yes or advance something and move forward. a 2-week or 3-week delay on any one of those could delay this project by a year and a half or longer. So we want to be very timely with our decisions. So again, the reason tonight we're presenting is that we're looking forward tonight for council, just affirmation that yes, we want to move this project forward as fast as possible and follow the process and be very timely about it. One of the things we want to make sure we do is make sure we get good information on the website to the whole community, that they know about this from this point forward, every step that's going to happen, when things will happen. So if they have questions about, will it impact my property or will utilities be changed, we'll be able to put as much information as current as possible on the website and keep the public very well informed about the project. And we're working on some templates for that to get that up and going. The last thing I want to note is our part in the project is to get through the design and the environmental clearance. At that point, the project will be turned over to the state. They will acquire right-of-way and they will construct the project on behalf of the project. So that works out somewhat to our advantage in the sense to have them do that. As I said, we are ready this week to select that consultant, and this is an important project. We're well funded. This is not the project to have one foot on the gas and one foot on the brake as we move forward. We need to be very expeditious about this. So I'm here to answer any questions you may have about it. We can periodically provide written updates, the website updates to council to let you know where we're at. But for the next 2 years, we'll be trying to get through this study, feasibility study, and at some point there'll be some public presentation also, official public presentation. I can answer any questions at this point.
I have a question. The 25 million, are you projecting that's what the cost is going to
Yes.
be then?
Yes.
Because every few years that we talk about this, it keeps
Yep.
going up and up and up.
Yep, that's based on our best engineer's estimate. We used MS Consultants to help perfect that number for our application. And that's where the number is right now. There's some flexibility in that. Based on the size of the scope of the project, we could trim parts back. The consultant we're selecting has some ideas about trying to save some money on the railroad bridge, which we'd love to do that since it's not our bridge, the railroad's bridge.
Right.
So as we go through the process, we'll be doing that value engineering and try to get some cost control and restraint in that. That's a good question.
And just one other comment. I know that the levy failed for the roads, and the levy was never there to do this project. And I just want to make sure that people don't say, oh, see, well, they found the money without us doing that. This was never on that.
That's
I just
correct.
want that to be known to everybody. Hear me, Brandon? Thank you.
That's a good point. Thank you, Mayor.
Bill, what's the other partners would come back in 19 for additional funding? Would we be going back to the same partners that are already on board? Or are there additional partners that we would then be trying to engage for additional monies?
That's a good question. I think my intention is to go back to the state both for safety funding. We asked for more safety funding than we received, but we are very glad to receive the $3 million. And also back to TRAC. TRAC is really designed for these large projects that are more than $12 million. We were awarded $1.5 million because we had really nothing done other than a concept. TRAC is more inclined to make larger awards to projects that are proven, the community has invested already their funds in terms of design, environmental clearance. And at that point, we're hoping that we'll be able to have a good argument that this is a very important project, not just locally, but for the region. The freight study that's ongoing with ODOT will identify this route, both for 36 and 37 through there, as the primary state freight route. And that will, I believe, hold some weight also in the presentation back to them, that this is a very significant regional and state project. Hopefully that will attract additional TRAC funding at that point. Those will be the two primary sources of large funding.
I think in addition, we've talked about the county, Delaware County, and we've talked to them informally about that, and we will be putting together a request to them following council's review. But obviously, this regional project, we have the state, the federal government, the city, and obviously our different funding sources. But I think it's also it was ranked as the #2 project for the Morpsey region for these competitive advantage projects, this and the Big Walnut interchange. So I think there's regional significance to this. So I think there's a case to be made, I think, that Delaware County consider partnering with us. And we've talked to them about that, and it's no surprise. I think it's really just making the request and then taking it from there.
Ironically, when Morpsey was here for a visit and we drove through the point, we drove right through the point. There was no stopping, but it was like 2:00 in the afternoon. It's like, this was not the time to bring them through. It's like, are you kidding me?
Right.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
So it's going to be a number of years before this fix is in place, and so we need to find a way to live with what we have until the fix can be made. One of the things I noticed, and I know it's been discussed before, is our city does not know how to conduct a proper zipper merge. So we have everybody being polite in the right lane, backing it all the way up,
Mhm.
and then if you try to use the left lane, every now and then you'll get gestures or various. Is there a way that we could put up one of our roaming signs that say, use both lanes, take
Yeah.
turns?
And I've been working with Councilman Hellinger a lot on this, and we've been upgrading our signs to higher and higher levels and our pavement markings. And yes, I mean, I go through it and purposely get in the left lane to try to educate people, and I get the same response sometimes.
I had someone pull out and stop me.
Yes,
It's
yeah,
like, okay, well, we can all just sit here then.
yes.
But
We continue to work on that and try to, it is an education, a public education, to say it is more efficient to use both lanes and merge politely than to stack up all the way back to, and not be efficient. So there's a reason there's 2 lanes there and a merge, and that's using both. So we can try to educate the public better. It's a really good point.
yeah, I was just thinking like the blinking sign.
Yeah.
Maybe that would work, I don't know.
Any other questions for Bill?
Just the other thing, just real quickly, Mayor, 2 things Bill alluded to. One is the partnering agreement with Morpsey. So in the next couple of months, there will be legislation presented to you authorizing the city to enter an agreement with them. So that will really be signing kind of on the bottom line with respect to our obligations for the funding. Secondly, we've not forgotten the downstream traffic issues at all. We've not forgotten the current state of East Central and the deplorable state that it's in. And we're currently evaluating not only how to fix that road, but how to improve the capacity and the movements of that. So that is something that will be coming back to City Council and the public in the next couple of months. We're evaluating alternatives because one of the things that came up during the levy discussions that always comes up when you talk about the point is, what about East Central? What about the traffic, the backups? Are you just going to move the problem from one area to the next? We won't be, but we still have to address those capacity issues at Lake and Channing and these other areas. So that will be another conversation we'll be having with the community, which will come with a request for federal funding, perhaps even next year. Because again, it's not unlike this project; it's a very regional project. So I just wanted to make sure folks were aware of that. And as the mayor indicated during the levy discussions, the question came up: what happens if the levy fails? Obviously, we're moving ahead with this, and we had moved ahead with it before the levy. Had the levy passed, the additional $2 million for maintenance obviously could have helped free up dollars that could otherwise go here. So, but that's the situation we're in now, where we have to rely on these other partners and our own resources, and hopefully that's why we'll be able to get additional partners to come to the table for this project.
Okay,
Full speed ahead.
full speed ahead, Mike.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Elaine, if you'll read item 10, the agenda, please, for record, thank you. Oh, get good tonight.
Established July 24th, 2017 at 7:30 PM as a date and time for a public hearing regarding a designated outdoor refreshment area, DORA, contingent upon submission of an application to City Council by Friday, July 7th, 2017.
And just to point out, we do have a draft application that was actually Jackie and a number of other staff members helped put that together last week. It's going through an internal review, but we will meet these timetables. So we will have that information that will be part of the application, the notice that goes into the newspaper. So we're on track for that.
Thank you. And Elaine, if you'll read item 11 into the record, please.
Item 11, ordinance number 17-40, an ordinance supplementing the 2017 appropriations ordinance to provide additional funding for engineering wages and declaring an emergency. Emergency clause. That this ordinance is hereby declared to be an emergency measure necessary to provide for the public peace, safety, health, and welfare of the city, and for the further reason to provide for the timely review of development plans and for the continued utilization of construction inspection services, and as such will be in full force and effect immediately upon its passage.
Thank you. Bill?
Yeah, nothing further to add for presentation, other than section 1 was modified slightly by finance director regarding where the wages will go. I can answer any questions.
Any questions for Bill? All right. Do you want to vote on this? This is second reading. Do you want to vote on it tonight, or do you want to take it to third reading?
We'd ask if you could vote. You're not meeting again until the end of July,
Oh, yeah.
so if it's okay, we would like your consideration this evening.
In that case, I make a motion to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 1740.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Hellinger, second by Mr. Rohr. Any further roll call, please?
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Motion to enact the emergency clause on ordinance 1740.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Hellinger, second by Mr. Rohr. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Motion to approve ordinance 1740.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hellinger, second by Mr. Rohr. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Motion carries.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, so you're doing 12.
These are all
Do
Dave's.
you want to, yeah, I know.
Wanna read all these?
Do you want to just do 12 and 13 together? Okay.
Ordinance number 17-43, an ordinance for Pulte Homes approving a final development plan for the communities at Glen Ross, Section 11, for 58 single-family lots on 22.74 acres on property zoned R2 PMU, one family residential district with a planned mixed-use overlay district, and located south of Cheshire Road on Winterbourne Drive, Solstice Road, Stone Quarry Drive, and Hollyberry Lane. Ordinance number 17-44, an ordinance for Pulte Homes approving a final subdivision plat for the communities at Glen Ross, Section 11, for 58 single-family lots on 22.74 acres on property zoned R2 PMU, one family residential district with a planned mixed-use overlay district, and located south of Cheshire Drive, Solstice Road, Stone Quarry Drive, and Hollyberry Lane.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, members of council, these are for final development plan and final development as read by the clerk for communities at Glen Ross, Section 11. This is would be the first area south of Cheshire Road to be developed as part of the large communities of Glen Ross subdivision. Here you see everything in its preliminary form south of Cheshire Road, and in yellow is the section in question before you tonight, Section 11. And this is the approved preliminary plat. There have been a couple changes coming into final. This is in your packet, probably a lot easier to see in detail in your packet, but obviously it shows typical plat information, lot sizes. Recall these are the smaller lot homes in that section of Glen Ross. The communities of Glen Ross. Just want to show you some examples of the level of quality of the fronts of these homes. I know there were more of these in your packet as well. And finally, color rendering, which I think is a little bit easier to see on the screens. One of the changes was related to this area, and that came out of the council approvals with the zoning text and the preliminary plans when we did that. And that was to put in an emergency access drive. You see that here. We've worked with our safety forces to minimize the width of that drive so it doesn't feel like a road, but still is sufficient to their needs. And maybe one day we'll provide an additional pathway connection if a bike path is ever developed along that south side of Cheshire Road as well. But for the moment, it satisfies the condition that you placed on the previous actions. And then as they have been working on final engineering, there's been some need for a little bit near detention basins. If you recall, the basin did go up into this area before. Obviously, that can't happen with the emergency access drive, so they had to rework that a little bit. One of the things we talked about at Planning Commission, it's part of your conditions here, the developer is aware of it, is kind of beefing up the landscaping and the buffering on the north side of those ponds and also along the emergency access drive, so adjacent to the existing single-family homes. We're going to try to find that balance between our staff and the developer, between making the emergency access drive look like a road or drive or something inviting for the public to drive on. That's not its intent. It's just really an emergency in the case of a true emergency where our safety forces could get there, and obviously still have everything fit in with the landscaping of communities of Glen Ross. Other than that, everything is completely in conformance with the text in your previous approvals. Your Planning Commission did recommend approval of this unanimously at its last meeting. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
So how many entrances and exits do we have? I see 4 that I'm looking at?
Well, you
Or
have
5?
you have one down Winterbourne.
Yeah.
This roundabout is just starting construction now. This would be the secondary one, and that was the discussion at council last time. We had presented to you, and Planning Commission had recommended that if you build the southern pieces in the exact phasing that is proposed, you would get the next drive to the south with the next phase of development, and therefore 2 accesses off Winterbourne. You decided as council that you wanted this put in with the first phase, and so we've worked with the applicant to make sure that that's happened.
Well, that's what I remembered when I'm looking at the map and I'm thinking, wait a minute, there's 5. Why do we need the other? But
eventually, Winterbourne, it's a matter of construction. Eventually, Winterbourne will go, at least on a long-range transportation plan, all the way to Peach Blow. Obviously, that requires some annexation development on property to the south of this, and it's going to take a little while to get there.
any other questions for Dave? What is the wish of council on ordinance 17-43?
Motion to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 1743.
Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Hellinger, a second by Mrs. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Motion to approve ordinance 1743.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hellinger, second by Mrs. Keller. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries.
Motion to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 1744.
Sorry, second.
Motion by Mr. Hellinger, second by Mrs. Keller. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Motion to approve ordinance 1744.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hellinger, second by Mrs. Keller. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. All right, Elaine, if you'll read 14 through 17.
Ordinance number 17-45, an ordinance for Glen Road Capital LLC approving a preliminary development plan for Belmont Place, sections 4 and 5 for 72 single-family lots on approximately 21.5 acres on property zoned R3 PMU, one family residential district with a planned mixed-use overlay district and located on McNamara Loop, Neville Lane, and Square Gator Lane. Ordinance number 17-46, an ordinance for Glen Road Capital LLC approving a final development plan for Belmont Place sections 4 and 5 for 72 single-family lots on approximately 21.5 acres on property zone R3 PMU, one family residential district with a planned mixed-use overlay district and located on McNamara Loop, Neville Lane, and Square Gator Lane. Ordinance number 17-47. An ordinance for Glen Road Capital LLC approving a preliminary subdivision plat for Belmont Place, Sections 4 and 5 for 72 single-family lots on approximately 21.5 acres on property zoned R3 PMU, one family residential district with a planned mixed-use overlay district and located on McNamara Loop, Neville Lane, and Square Gator Lane. An ordinance number 17-48, an ordinance for Glen Road Capital LLC approving a final subdivision plat for Belmont Place, Sections 4 for 34 single-family lots on approximately 10.426 acres on property zoned R3 PMU, one family residential district with a planned mixed-use overlay district, and located on McNamara Loop and Square Gator Lane.
Good job.
All right.
Mr. Eplin?
Madam Mayor,
Oxygen.
Madam Mayor, members of council, this is for the next two phases of the Belmont Place subdivision, which has been received quite well in our community, and they're building a lot of houses out there. Ryan Homes. It's just north of the first three phases that come off of Peach Blow Road and Crownover Way, better known to all of us who went through the preliminary agreements as Midpoint Road, which will connect eventually over to Glen Parkway here as the front portion of this property is developed. And I know the developers in discussions with builders for that property as well as we speak. This would be two sections, and the cases in front of you do a couple things. Number one, it's the preliminary final development plan and the preliminary plat for both sections in yellow, sections 4 and 5. And then in front of you to keep momentum going, and because the final engineering has been completed, is the final plat for section 4. Section 4 is the section to the east, and that would continue McNamara Loop. There is a small pocket park designed in, and that was designed into the zoning text as well as the preliminary development plans for the overall half of this development. We have been working with our Parks and Natural Resources Department, Ted Miller and his staff, on the exact programming of that park. You see a number of examples in your packet, and I think we're all on the same page with that, but we'll let him have the final say for your condition in your ordinance this evening. This would be for 34 lots in section 4, and overall between 4 and 5, 72 total housing lots here to finish off the single family portion of the development. Your planning commission did recommend unanimous approval at its last meeting, as does staff, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions for Dave? What is the wish of council on ordinance 17-45?
Move to suspend the rules requiring 3 readings on ordinance 17-45.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Hellinger. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move to suspend the rules on ordinance 17-46.
Wait, you just suspended the rules on 45. You want to approve it?
Wait, okay,
Let's
sorry.
go back to 45.
Okay. Move for approval of 17-45, sorry.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Hellinger. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
We can't say I move to suspend the rules on 17-46, 47. We can't do that.
No, one at a time.
Okay.
Nice try.
Move to suspend the rules on 17-46.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Hellinger. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for approval of 17-46.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Hellinger. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move to suspend the rules on 17-47.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Hellinger. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for approval of 17-47.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Hellinger. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move to suspend the rules on 17-48.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Hellinger. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Move for the approval of 17-48.
Second.
Motion by Mrs. Keller, second by Mr. Hellinger. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes, motion carries. Thank you. Okay, item 18 is consideration of resolution 17-40. Elaine, if you'll please read this into the record.
Resolution number 17-40, a resolution authorizing the city manager to negotiate an incentive package with Co-Hatch at 659 High Street, Worthington, for a high-end co-working space in downtown Delaware.
Good evening, Mr. Hughes.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of council. Thank you for having me this evening. We're here presenting to you a resolution allowing the city manager to finalize incentive negotiations on a project that we presented about at the last council meeting and had Mr. McCorkle, David McCorkle from the city of Worthington, where this company currently has a facility in place. So I won't reiterate all of that, but would be happy to entertain any questions in regards to the project. Hopefully, once we finalize negotiations, we'd quickly move forward with starting renovations of the building with that company and getting the company in place soon.
Yeah, I think just want to point out, obviously, that any final package has to come back to city council for the appropriate approvals.
Yes, those would come back in the forms of agreements and accompanying legislation allowing those to be entered into as agreements.
You would see at our next council meeting then?
I would hope, yeah, because we're taking the first meeting off, so there's a possibility we could get that done in 4 weeks. That's about what we're looking at.
Madam Mayor, I move for approval of resolution 1740. Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Jones, second by Mr. Browning. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm reminded, Mayor, that we should have probably voted on that item 10. I thought they were just setting it, but you're indicating we should.
If we're going to safe side, we should vote, and I only say that I was thinking about it over the past few minutes, and I apologize for not having my brain act sooner. We always vote on the consent agenda as a package, and that's usually as part of the consent agenda. So just to cover our bases, it probably makes sense just to vote to make sure that we officially set that date. And I want to be extra careful because we're doing this a little, trying to expedite the process as much as possible. So I want to make sure we officially set that date by council action.
Are we allowed to set a public hearing for something that hasn't been filed yet?
I think we can certainly set a hearing. It's contingent. The way it's worded is it's contingent on that thing being filed. So if you're already sort of authorizing us to take it off the agenda, if it's not filed by the date that you set in your notice, but I think you can just basically setting a hearing on something that you anticipate getting. But because it's a little unorthodox, that's why I would like to have a vote on, just to make sure we know that council knows this hearing is coming and has authorized it. If we meet our requirements.
Okay, so is there a motion for a public hearing for July 24th, 2017 at 7:30 for the DORA?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, so a motion, is that okay?
Yeah, perfect,
So a
perfect.
motion by Mr. Browning, a second by Mrs. Keller. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Motion carries. Okay, now let's go back to 19. Resolution 17-41, if you'll please read this in the record.
Resolution number 17-41, a resolution opposing the President's budget proposal to eliminate funding from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development's Community Development Block Grant and the Home Investment Partnerships Programs.
This really follows discussion really in the planning and community development field regarding the proposal to zero out, eliminate the Community Development Block Grant Program, which the city has benefited from tremendously over the last, ever since we've been part of the program, which has been a couple of decades. This is discretionary money that goes to target low to moderate income population groups. We've used it for repaving projects in those neighborhoods. We've used it for park improvements. We've used it for our home program, any number of different housing improvements in various neighborhoods in the city. And it's there's a memo in your packet that we've utilized about $900,000 of funds over the last decade. And this just puts us on record as opposing those cuts and transmitting that information to our congressional delegation so they're aware of it. And Dave can elaborate. I think this has probably come up in his professional circles.
I think you've covered it well. We did have an attachment from the American Planning Association president with probably what I consider to be one of the strongest worded remarks from one of our president on a federal item. Obviously, these programs do a lot of good in a lot of communities, not just ours, around the country for relatively little money. If the state and federal government felt like cutting some of the red tape with the grants, I'd be more than happy to go to Washington to discuss that with them. But the funding is used widely, and for us as well, last several years. I don't have the exact number. We've used it for repaving in low and moderate income neighborhoods. But as Tom said, we've used it for the zero depth entry at Mingo Pool. We've used it for Ross Street park improvements and other things through the year. So it'd be a shame to see this grant source that does so much good go away. Happy to answer any questions.
Dave, isn't the philosophical question here, though, whether we want the federal government to have its hands this deeply into our local communities?
The thing with these grant programs is local communities get to propose and or decide, depending on the program, how the funds are spent within rules and regulations set by the federal government and the state of Ohio. And so you do have some flexibility to request different kinds of projects like we just discussed. Each locality can decide for itself which projects are more or less important to. So I think it's not just an imposition, it's more that the federal government is providing funding and allowing localities to generally decide on projects within those rules of how they see best fit to use the money to improve their community. That's how I view it. Again, if there were less red tape involved from both the state and the federal government, that would not make me displeased.
Do we think Trump is going to change his mind because we passed a resolution?
I don't think the president probably will, but I honestly I don't think this will zero out. I don't think, and from what I read and what I understand, I don't think it'll survive congressional review. Time will tell.
I think it's important, at least that our U.S. senators and our congressmen know what our position is and that it has been a beneficial program. And this has had bipartisan support for years.
Decades.
Yeah, decades. And I think what he's proposing is pretty draconian, and I don't think it probably will pass, but I still think it makes sense to go on record so our representatives know our position and the importance of this program for our low to moderate income neighborhoods.
I really like the fact that you listed everything that money went towards. The habitat houses, the rehabbing, the rental assistance. So I think that's wonderful.
And this really is just a summary.
Right.
So our CHIP program, that's the second portion of this, is funded through home and CDBG.
Yeah, I should say that the revolving loan fund program, our facade improvement program.
The revolving loan fund was, some of that was recharacterized into CDBG like expenditures for the facade as well.
Okay, what is the wish of council on this?
Motion to approve Resolution 1741.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hellinger, second by Mr. Jones. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
I'll say yes, but I'll go on record saying I don't like it. Not that I don't like, to me, it feels very unusual for us to be passing a resolution in this regard, but I agree with the sentiment of it, so I'll say yes.
Okay.
I don't like that we're needing to do it or that we are doing it. Fair? Yes.
I think that was a yes. Keep going.
It's a
quick.
yes.
Quick.
It's a yes under duress.
There's no dress on there, just yes or no.
Yes.
Okay, keep going. Mr.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
No.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. I know without the money, there's people that wouldn't get a Habitat house. So, I mean, I'm thankful that we have it, and I really hate to see it go away. Okay, motion carries. Item 20 is consideration of ordinance 17-49. Amen, if you'll please read this in the record.
Ordinance number 17-49, an ordinance approving the sale of a street department 2002 International tandem dump truck that has outgrown its useful serviceable life.
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'm required to notify you and seek approval when we anticipate a piece of equipment may sell for more than $5,000, as we do for this truck. We try to keep our line vehicles 10 to 12 years. This truck was kept 13 years when it was taken out of service, taken out of primary service. We used it in a backup capacity only until it was recently replaced with a new tandem truck. So now it's time to put it on Gov Deals. And I would seek approval tonight, seeing this is basic business, and we're not going to meet again until end of July. We hope to get this on Gov Deals and out of the lot.
Okay. What is the wish of council on this dump truck?
Motion to approve ordinance 1749.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hellinger, second by Mr. Browning. Yeah. Did you suspend the rules?
It's, okay. Motion to suspend the rules on ordinance 1749.
Second.
Okay. Motion by Mr. Hellinger, second by Mr. Browning. Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes.
Motion to approve ordinance 1749.
Second.
Motion by Mr. Hellinger, second by Mr. Browning. Any further discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Jones?
Yes.
Mrs. Keller?
Yes.
Mr. Browning?
Yes.
Mr. Rohr?
Yes.
Mr. Hellinger?
Yes.
Mayor Riggle?
Yes. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Item 21 is Finance Director's Report. Dean?
Thank you. The report through the end of May was included with your packet, just barely. I was pinched for time on Thursday. I didn't get to add a whole lot to the highlight section. Well, I'll update that a little bit more. We'll have the mid-year report coming up next month. I would note our income tax collection, again, primary discretionary revenue. We're up about 4.45% for the year, which it's pretty good. A little below what we had projected, but we'll see how that plays out through the remainder of the year. Entertain any questions you may have.
Any questions for Dean? Okay. Thank you. City Manager's Report?
Just real quickly, a couple of reminders. Main Street Award Dinner. I know Lane had notified everybody about that. If you're interested, please let her know so she can RSVP for the Thursday night event. CIP planning has begun. We submit the CIP to City Council on August 15th. We have a kind of a half-day retreat with some of the key departments that put together the CIP this Friday. 4th of July next week, great event in town, and it's a Tuesday. So hopefully everybody will be there. The parade is, I'll let the mayor give us an update on that. Yesterday, we had another great event in town, the Mingo Man Triathlon. It was actually converted to a duathlon due to the flooding at Delaware State Park.
The beach was inundated, so they had to eliminate the swim event. But it went off without a hitch. I happened to see Craig Thompson yesterday. I stopped by the park, and they had over 500 participants. And it was just a really, really good day. And hats off.
You did not participate?
I didn't, I kind of forgot about it. I'm going to do the Dave Staley, though. I'm going to do the Dave Staley. I'll report on that. And I see Jim Titus out there. We have not forgotten about the request for the plaque. I've talked to the assistant city manager about that. We've got to find a source of funding, but we understand that it probably makes sense to have something out there. So we'll be following up with you on that because I know you asked us about that. So and that's all.
Okay. Council comments. Mr. Jones.
I have nothing tonight, Mayor.
Mrs. Keller.
I do. I'd like to clarify my position on medical marijuana since it was brought up this evening. Medical marijuana is used to relieve symptoms. It's medical marijuana. It's very different than the type of street marijuana that is commonly known to get people high. And it's used to treat pain, nausea from chemotherapy, to help people who are suffering from a lack of appetite, people who have cancer. I watched my own grandfather die of cancer and know that medical marijuana could have helped him tremendously. It's also used to treat children with very difficult seizures. So I think that when we're talking about marijuana, there's a very big difference between the street marijuana that's available and the use of cannabis oil that actually has a medical usage. So philosophically, that's how I feel about medical marijuana, and I have no issue with it being part of industry in the city of Delaware. But my feeling on it basically is primarily because of the people who are suffering that are in need of this to relieve that. So just wanted to clarify that.
Okay.
Excuse me, could I comment on that? I know it's out of order, but since it's brought up.
Sure, but you have to come to the microphone because it has to be recorded. Sorry. We're not going to get into an argument, though, right? Okay.
I'm easy going.
Okay.
Need name, address again? Joel Schaefer, 242 West Lincoln Avenue, Delaware, Ohio. I appreciate what Ms. Keller brought up, but the thing that stands out to me with medical marijuana is that what the article states is that you're proposing that we have growing fields here in Delaware County and that you have shops that will disperse this. Now, when I look at medical marijuana, I understand that there are already, the Food and Drug Administration has numerous medications that are made with medical marijuana, and it's available to people. In this case, though, you're talking about shop owners setting up in Delaware and selling it. Is that correct?
That's not at all what we were discussing. No, that wasn't even within the realm of our discussion.
I guess I would refer back to the article that medical marijuana related businesses. What would they be then?
They would be businesses that would be located in Delaware that would be manufacturing it, not selling it to the public.
So, all right, that would be different.
Processing.
Growing it and processing it.
Right. Yeah.
So we're going to have fields of marijuana in Delaware County.
No.
I think it's more of the extraction of the oils type business.
There are actually, just to clarify, we haven't really started to talk about anything yet, but the state under the medical marijuana scheme regulation that's still rolling out, so we don't even know what it all looks like, actually has many different types of businesses. One would be cultivation, one would be the processing, one would be the dispensaries, and Dave, what's the fourth? I'm missing one. There's a fourth, but basically they're different kinds, and each one has its own regulation. The state has only issued the regulations on the cultivation to this point, so we don't really even know what the regulation scheme is for the other ones yet. But nothing is before council right now. They were just asked to get information that we're researching because this is new to everybody. So it's hard to ask them what's on the table because we don't know yet. We're still trying to figure out what's going on with the state and what potential thing could even work here in Delaware. So I think there's nothing in front of council right now, but there may be something coming up in the future.
Well, I find it interesting from the article, which Mr. Holman was quoted, that Powell has already made their mind up that they don't want any part of it. I don't see why Delaware County would be any different than how? I mean, I think that's an area that we would rather copy than ignore. But if we're growing it and if we're processing it, then we're promoting it to a certain extent.
I'm okay with that.
Well, I'm not.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't think Delaware County is the area, and I don't think, that any business, whether it's, this was one that was voted on by the voters and it was turned down 77%. The only reason why it's an issue now is because of our elected officials who decided to ignore the voters. And I find that appalling that the voters were so adamant against it, yet our elected officials decided to go with it. And I would look to the council for a little more, a higher standard than what our other elected officials have demonstrated. And I just don't think Delaware is the place. You mentioned that the other four issues, Mr. Shulman, that had to do with the dispensing and so on. When you look at medical marijuana, it's not just in a pill form. You're talking, it would probably be in a liquid form. It could be in an edible form.
I don't think we know yet, but I think they're not allowed to smoke it. I think that's clear already. Isn't that correct, Dave?
I believe that's the way the rules are going to come down.
And we're not sure, but I mean, continue, but we're still trying to learn all these things.
The thing that I find interesting is if you have as a parent, I find it interesting that you could have a product, a gummy bear, which is a medical marijuana, and a gummy bear. If you would put them side by side, I don't think a parent's going to know which one is which, let alone a child. There's going to be drinks. They're going to be in the same form. Again, how are people going to know one from the other? I
You
mean,
need a prescription from a doctor for a medical
well,
condition.
prescription from doctors for OxyContin are,
Okay.
So
These are, I guess I would just point out, just so you feel better, these are perfectly good questions to have, and we're just trying to figure them out. But nothing council is going to do one way or the other is going to happen without a public hearing and this kind of opportunity to have this conversation. So I don't want you to leave here thinking, hey, council just approved marijuana. They didn't do anything of the sort. So there will be a real hearing if anything's coming forward. Obviously I would encourage you to come back and speak again. But there's nothing in front of council right now. So it's not happening as of today.
understandable. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate your time.
Mr. Brandon, do you have anything? Council comments?
Yes, I attended the water plant on Saturday, and it was fantastic. Very good. The Stratford Woods having a block party tomorrow night, 5 o'clock. If they want to come over, come on over. And I don't know, we kind of danced around the roads issue, kind of brought it up here or there. And at some point, I know we need to revisit that and yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Tomorrow? Yes, tomorrow. Tuesday? I got a keg of Sprite.
That's true.
I have nothing, Madam Mayor, thank you.
Mr. Elegant?
Just a couple things, and Chief Donahue, I guess this is a question for you. On your last report, you had highlighted the naloxone usage and whatever that number was, 64, whatever. But that was administrations, independent or separate administrations, although there can be multiple units involved with one incident, correct?
That is correct.
And they wouldn't necessarily all be an opiate because it can be.
You're absolutely correct. We may arrive on scene for an unknown unconscious patient where we'll administer Narcan to that patient to rule out potential opioid usage.
All right. And are we seeing that, and we're seeing that, I think the numbers that you showed from prior year to this year, we're still seeing an increase in that, is that correct?
No, I believe, I know last month we had a little bit larger amount, but I think we're right on track, if not possibly a little bit less. I can take a further look at it. I'm shooting from memory right now.
Okay, good deal. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
The only other thing I had was obviously the pool issue with admissions. I'm glad that staff was able to get that taken care of and get that policy in place. I think that kind of illustrated the ongoing need for us to maybe be a little more involved in that, as our contractors need to follow us as the dance lead on that. And I think it also continues to show, at least the comments and the discussion threads that I was involved in, I think it continues to show the need for a viable separation between the Y and the city recreation services, because there's a lot of misunderstanding in there. And if you look at those different threads, people are saying, oh, the Y's running everything. And that's been a bug in my bonnet for a couple years now, and I don't see it getting any better. I think we really need to get that separation. And when we're doing city recreation services, I don't care, the Y's our contractor, but they should be wearing Delaware Recreation Services apparel. They shouldn't be spouting off as a Y. They should be wearing Y apparel. And when they're doing their own thing, that's cool. I mean, they are the Y. But I think there's a lot of confusion out there in public with regards to who's doing what, who's responsible. And I think we really need to address that on a go-forward basis. So that's all I got.
And we've got negotiations coming up for the next renewal, so that'd be the appropriate time that we would address that. Councilman Hellinger and I have had those discussions previously, figuring out how to do that.
Okay, and I also attended the Water Treatment Plant Education Center, which is really nice. If you didn't make it over Saturday, try to get over there sometime. Take your kids. It's very impressive. They did a great job in it. Brad's not here tonight, but kudos to him. First Commonwealth Bank is now in town, as most of you know. Tom and I attended a little social thing just before we came over here. And all of the people from Indiana and Pennsylvania, they're here. They're just so excited about Delaware. It's so refreshing to go in and hear them comment about our great city. So I think they'll be welcomed. And as Tom said, the parade is also Tuesday, and it is at 3 o'clock. So please support it. And I did run into Warren at the concert to make sure that that's going forward, and encourage people to come to that also before our great fireworks. And with that, I will look for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned at 8:13.